This is the future of web forms, and this topic actually has a little bit of a history behind it. In that I've spoken at Code on the Beach. This is my third year in a row speaking at Code on the Beach. And last year, I was at 9 a.m. on Sunday up against John Papa talking about AngularJS. I had, my wife was in the room. I had Joe Healy. I had James Quick, who's another Microsoft evangelist. And I had one 18-year-old kid came walking in because he didn't know what Angular was. And I asked Paul later, I'm like, Paul Irwin, the guy that runs Code on the Beach. And I was like, man, you're killing me with this session. He's like, I promise you, you'll get prime time next year. Like, okay. So I got a good session. I got a good spot this year. So I'm like, okay. So I submitted a session. And my first session was, it's going to be all this crazy API work you can do with Azure Storage. And he's like, no, people already covered that. Okay. Second topic, I'm going to cover .NET 5 and some new features. No, we already got that being covered. All right. I'm going to cover some Visual Studio 2015 stuff. Nope, we already got that covered. Future of web forms? Okay, yeah, we'll take that. So that's how we're at Future of web forms. So it's an interesting concept of how it all kind of went down, but I'll try to make it as interesting as I can. So I've kind of bounced this off of a couple different people, and so this is going to be the common theme because it's Monty Python. Okay, Monty Python fans? Okay, good. So that will come into play in a little bit. So the whole thing is like of what I think is going to happen with web forms and what I think is going to happen to the code and stuff like that. So we'll kind of talk about like how we got here, and then I will cover some new stuff that's in 4.6. I do have a couple of examples of just some interesting aspects of 4.6. I'm in by no way an expert on all the things that are coming in 4.6. I've done some research into some of them, and I'll demo them for you. I know about some of the other ones, but I haven't actually implemented them yet. So if you ask me a question, I might make up an answer. I don't know. And then kind of my thoughts as to where it's going to head. And then I have a slightly different scope of the presentation is I've done web development for 16 years. I have started out with ASP and SQL 6.5. I moved into .NET 1.1. I did VB.NET, did that to .NET 2.0. And then when I switched companies, I did learn C#. And I've done C# ever since. So I mean, it's all web forms. I know a little bit about MVC. So I actually took a project that I did and I rewrote it as MVC. And I'm just going to share with you guys who's an MVC developer. Okay, you're going to laugh because I have really bad code that I'm going to show you, but it's a web developer's kind of take on it and the areas that I struggled with, and I just figured I would share that with people. And then I kind of have some thoughts moving forward, but I'd be interested to know yours as well. So the first thing is, how do we get here? And this is basically the history of .NET. They started out with .NET 1, and then they just kept getting a bigger car. I mean, over the years, as everybody knows, it's this huge mammoth system of .NET 4, and that's what 4.5, and that's what everybody hates, and they all went back down to the basics, which is essentially hasn't changed much since 2009, which is ASP.NET MVC. This is really nothing new. Everybody knows this stuff, but in case you didn't, I figured I'd show it to you. I basically started, like I said before, .NET 1, and these are the actual release dates of when they all came out, according to Wikipedia, so you know it's true. But really, ASP.NET MVC, I mean, it hasn't really changed. I mean, they've obviously added functionality to it, but it still has the mentality of you're picking the things that you want. It's a very minimalist approach, whereas web forms. Now, from a web forms developer, I kind of like having everything because it's all there and I can do everything I need to. And the idea of building it from scratch and kind of piecing it together using the MVC model is a bit of a challenge for me. So nothing real new there. So we have our first thing. Okay, so anybody that did cornhole, I'm good on my word if I offer you free beer. This is your first chance to get a free beer tonight. It's a trivia question, and does anybody know who came up with the MVC framework? Do you know his name?
Well, it's a Norwegian guy with the last name of C, like Soltis.
I don't know if he's Norwegian, but it is a strange name. I can give you that. I have a follow-up question that if you just say roughly the right answer, you'll still win the beer. Do you know when the MVC framework was actually? Okay, so you get the free beer. The guy's name is, I actually had to pull it up. I no kidding had to like look it up to find out how you would even pronounce it. It's oh good, I don't have internet connection, so that's going to be good. That's okay, I don't need it. It's like Trivgay.
Does it have like an O with a slash through it?
Trivgay Reinskog. That's his name. That. Whatever that means. That's his name. So he came up, actually it was in the 70s when MVC came about, which I had learned that like last year, and I was like, really? Everybody would think it was from 2009, but no, it's actually been around for a very long time. It just didn't really gain in popularity until recently when people got tired of moving around the semi. So I owe you a beer, and we'll discuss that in a little bit of how I get you that beer. So next part is what is new in 4.6, and there's several things, and this is why my thought is like it's hard to say something's dead when I know they're rolling out new features for it. And these are some of the main areas. The authentication. Basically, what I found with that is the new the new 4.6 web form templates. They basically have OpenID built into it, and it will allow you to integrate in with Azure AD very quickly and easily. They also have laid out templates in order to implement two-factor authentication. So if you want, to send a text to somebody and then they have to go to the website to log in. And token binding protocol, but I can't remember exactly what that one is. I just know it's part of the authentication updates. There's also the Rosyln compilers, and I actually have an example of that. So basically, these are new compilers that work with the new version of .NET with 4.6 and 5.0 moving forward, and they're a much faster, much more efficient compilation engine to do that. There's the possibility of doing async model binding, which I actually had to read up on this one a good bit to fully understand it because I've done a lot of the async and await in 4.5, and this basically allows you to be a little bit more task driven so that you can await it and then return a task, and then it enables you to bind your data much easier to, let's say, a data view or grid view or something with simple CRUD commands, insert object, select object, update object. The async model binding is basically available to the 4.6 framework to allow you to do that a little bit easier now. The HTTP 2, which is by far, I think, the coolest one, and I do have an example of that, that is by far, I think, the coolest. And they changed the way the protocol works. I think it's called hyperplexing, I think. But essentially, instead of multiple requests to the server for several resources, it combines them all into a single request. And I have a good example that shows you that. Ajax. Everybody loves Ajax. I always liked Ajax. I really did. Of course, I never had to deal with it as much as other people. But they have improved Ajax, meaning it has additional bug fixes and some stuff. That is still open source, and it's maintained by DevExpress. And I guess there's new updates for 4.6 for that. The ADO.NET, which is interesting, I only read into this one a little bit, but I think for your connection strings, you can basically force an always encrypted option, which is a nice feature if you're securing your application and stuff like that. The garbage collection, I don't really care. That's a hardware problem because they run out of systems. I had to read up on that one too. It was kind of interesting. It looks like you can basically set part of your memory so that the garbage collection won't have to worry about it, but it will keep itself in check. Does anybody know anything about that? No? Okay, I'll just make it up then. It's essentially, I think it's like reserved memory for your stuff that when you like do a gc.clean or whatever, it will retain what's in there. I think it's like a reserved space of the garbage collection. And then the JSON editor updates, IntelliSense for Bower and package JSON, as well as duplicate property. Basically, it's a lot of the things that David, if you're in his session, he showed you. You get a lot more IntelliSense and things like that out of your HTML, out of your JavaScript editors. So it makes it much more easier to work with as opposed to opening in Notepad, which is what I normally do because that's what I've done for 16 years. Does anybody know what this is? It's the rabbit. It's the rabbit they launch. It's a toy. It's all about Monty Python. So, all right. So let me jump over and I'll show you a couple of demos. And now I have to. Yep.
Is 4.6 available now, or when?
The 4.6 is currently available because it is in. It's in Visual Studio 2015. And as far as I know, I think it actually is released. I thought it was released. These are the ones coming. That was in June. Because I think I actually saw the actual release.
Yeah, that released a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks ago. I think they actually did it's when Visual Studio 2015 I think was made available. The 4.6 framework was released at that same time. So in order to show you the features of 4.6, there was two that I wanted to highlight. One was the Rosyln compilers, and then two was, and the Rosyln compilers allow you to use newer versions of the C# language, but you have to have Visual Studio 2015, the 4.6 framework, to do it. And in order to really use it, you have to have the Rosyln compilers in your site. And the project I'm showing you is for something else. So what I have here is I have a really impressive page that has new C# language in it. It's basically this catch when x equals 10, and I really don't care what the logic means. But when I run this, even if I have the 4.6 framework, out of the box, you'll get an error because it doesn't know how to interpret the new C# syntax. That's because this particular project doesn't have the compilers added into it, which is something I learned that I didn't realize, that I figured if you just made a 4.6 template, it would already have that in there. But in fact, it doesn't, and you have to come into and under my NuGet packages, I've already added it to here because I didn't know what the internet connection would be like, so I just added another one. Hopefully that will come up shortly. So this is the exact same page and the exact same logic, but in this particular project, I already have the Rosyln compilers, which aren't showing up. I don't know why. While we're waiting on that, let's F5 that, and you'll see because they have Rosyln compilers, it actually does what it's supposed to do. It does the if case when, and it actually works. So that's just showing you how 4.6 does do it. Okay, so it finally did show up. So there's a specific NuGet package that you install, which is this one right here. And once that's installed, it gives you, basically changes the compilers that your site will run under to the new, the CodeDOM compilers, which are Rosyln. So there's an example of the Rosyln compilers, which I don't know a ton about the Rosyln compilers and stuff. I've said the name at least 30 times, I think, in the last minute, but I really don't know much about them. I just know that they're faster and better, and I think they're leaner. So I'm still working on that. But the other demo I wanted to show you is actually very cool. So, so my Windows 10 installation is much larger than this VGA wants to allow me to show. So this is pretty cool, but this requires a couple things, and this is going to show you the new HTTP2 protocol. So I have a page with a lot of images. So when you make a request to a page, depending on the browser that you have, the browser will only allow, so I have lots of images. And if I F12 that, the browser will only allow 5 to maybe 10 requests to the same domain at a time. And so if you have more than that, it will queue them up for the next time, until the first one is done. So I have to clear this cache, and I had this set up. So let's do this, and so I'm gonna just only show the images, and I don't really care what the images look like. It's the same ones over and over. So it's because I can't see my window. There it is. So if you look at my images and how they're loaded, you can see that they're stacked. So these are having to wait on the previous ones because I have like 20-something images, and they're all coming like that. The HTTP2 protocols, what it does, I'm almost positive the name is hyperplexing, but essentially it combines all those HTTP requests into a single one that gets sent to the server. Now the server will still deliver as fast as it can deliver, but all the requests go in at one time, which is a much more efficient model. It's all one single request. But in order to do HTTP2, for one, you have to have Windows 10. You have to have the latest version of IE, and you have to have Windows 10, and you have to do it over SSL. So that's why I'm in my Windows 10 emulator, or not emulator, my virtual. And if I change this over to here, and yes, I know. Okay, let me set this up so it will already be there, and I don't have to do it. Images, okay. So it's the same page. I'm just now under HTTPS, and if you look at my image request, you can see they all were requested at the exact same time. Now they still take a while to to deliver, but basically the HTTP2 protocol put them all together into a single request so you don't have to wait. So that's a pretty awesome thing, especially. So I've run into this kind of thing a lot with maybe you have several JavaScript files or something and you haven't combined them into one because you're lazy. Or I built this one website for a modeling agency, and they're insane, and they wanted to have like 500 images on a page, and then they wanted like 20 megabyte images each, and I at least talked them out of that to use something scaled down in a CDN, but they still wanted to load like 500 at a time. But the way your browser will treat it is everything from the same domain. It makes it wait. So even if it is a CDN or something, it's still going to go through that same process. It's only going to be able to load like 10 at a time or whatever. So using something like the HTTP2, you're going to get a lot more benefit and a lot faster loading of all those resources at one time. So it's a much more efficient way to do it. So, all right. Any questions on the Rosyln compilers or the HTTP2? Okay. I did make a demo for the async compiler, but it didn't seem to work very well. And I really had trouble actually understanding all the aspects of what it is supposed to do. So unfortunately, I don't have that to show you, but at least I showed you 2 working demos. So, all right, so let's jump back into here, and let's see where we're at. We're at here. Oh, that's ruining the magic if I go to the next page too fast. So we talked about all that. So what is the future? So now you come into my opinion of the future. This is the I'm not dead yet scene. Trying to put him on the car, but he's not dead yet. So what can companies do? Company like the company I work for is a content management base, written in .NET. It's 13 years old, started in .NET, it's 13 years old. Ton of system.web stuff. To rewrite it, we estimated it'd be between 1.5 to 2 years to rewrite our entire platform into MVC or some other development pattern. Could rewrite it, probably going to take a long time to do that. I was talking to our CTO, and I think this is what we're going to go with. We don't know yet. We're still looking at it as some sort of wrapper for the system.web DLLs. Something to wrap around it so that we could then call it from some other development pattern, MVC or whatever may be, because you could do nothing, and that's one way to do it. Why do I even want to list do nothing? It really comes into what I think is going to happen to web forms. And the biggest thing I can say is I don't think they're going to die yet. I think, in everything I've read, you cannot get any definitive answer from Microsoft. I've never seen one, and trust me, I've looked at many sites to look for it. I think they're going to be open sourced. I think they're going to take the entire web form stack, and they're going to open source the whole thing, and then they're going to let the community support it. They've already done it with Ajax. Microsoft Ajax, they did the same thing there, and now it's open sourced. Ajax is still around, and it's still being updated, but it's not updated and maintained by Microsoft. I think it's the same thing is going to happen to web forms. And the reason I say that is just the sheer magnitude of companies that have built their entire business on web forms. I don't think it's, while I think it's going to happen eventually, I don't think it's going to happen day one when .NET 5.0 rolls out. Are they going to be like, okay, no more web forms, we're completely done? I would suspect that Microsoft will cave, and they will probably add a year or 2 of support of web forms, and then I think that's what's going to happen. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Is that crazy?
Well, I guess a question. So the 4.6, does that have the system.web in it, or does it no longer?
It does. 4.6 is live. That is web forms. It's still web forms. It's just the next.
You can upgrade an existing web form part to 4.6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just didn't know because so it's not aligned with the new 5.0.
What they said is .NET 5 will not have web forms in it.
Okay, yeah.
But they've also said that it won't have VB.NET. And I've since seen that I think it will have VB.NET now. I think it is going to support VB.NET.
The Visual Studio 2015 has 4.6 and 5.0.
Right. That is this installation, which every time I go into my presentation, I have to like duplicate, and then it comes back out. So this in here, if I were to open this up, yes, new, okay, great. So let's say a new project. So I had to roll back to the 2015 release candidate, Visual Studio 2015, in order to get a specific template that I needed for my demo. You can, because I couldn't get a license for the 2015 real version yet, because I haven't talked to our IT department, so I went back to the release candidate, that's why it's here. But if you look at this, just if I wanted to pick a new web application, the templates that they provide you, momentarily, you'll see it will be 4.6 or 5.0 for the templates. And you'll choose whether or not you want web forms or not. So, although if you click 5, I think the web forms gets grayed out. I don't know. Probably should have had this queued up ready to go because it's going to take it a second. But no, as far as I know, yeah, I mean, 4.6 is live and it is system.web. So that tells me that at least the current version until what, Q1 of 2016 is the release date, according to Cecil's presentation, is the release date of .NET 5. But even, like I said, even at that moment, there's just too many companies, I think, that have to deal with this problem. And rewriting it is not a solution, not an easy one. So here's web forms in the 4.6 templates, but you see in the 5, you don't have that. So you can't choose it. Again, these are the preview, the 5 preview templates, so they're not built out as much yet. But the 4.6 templates are there, whether or not you want to do web forms or what have you. So
I understand why it's called the system.web, but is there any reason why they went from ASP.NET 1 ASP.NET to now sort of separate pathways again? It's sort of confusing.
Why do they go to Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, Windows ME, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. I don't know. I have no idea why they changed it. I mean, actually, I remember looking for like the vNext or ASP.NET 1 is what it was called. Like I can't find anything on that now. I guess that's.
That was great. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it was so easy. But I think it totally. My guess is I think they did that because that changed the mentality. The ASP.NET 1 is everything. Yep. But people don't want everything. They only want the piece that they want. So I think they had to abandon this idea of one .NET for everything because people just didn't want it for whatever. I guess. I don't really know. I in no way work for Microsoft. I have worked with Microsoft for a very long time, and I've done a lot of work with them in conjunction. But I do not try to find logic in the ways of the Microsoft marketing machine. That's for sure. So, so with that being said, I was getting lower on like what I could show in this presentation. So now I've decided to send you on a little slightly different path. And now this is a web developer who's going to do some MVC. And I didn't do it well. It's not beautiful. But the history of it is I've made about 100 hello worlds in MVC. I've also made that movie database example, some kind of movie database. I never had a real project. So it was really difficult for me to really get into it because I never had a real project I needed to do with it. So I built this internal utility that I'll show you that we have a bunch of data stored in Azure. And basically what we do is we collect usage information on installations of our products so we know how to shape it and what features people are using, which ones they're not, stuff like that. Well, it's all stored in Azure Table Storage, so I needed to build a utility to access that and display it in a graphical, nice way. So I built it in web forms in like a day, because I was like, okay, done. And it was working fine, and I decided I'm going to try to build this in MVC. And I ran into a number of things, and this is kind of my thought process. How do I post data? And how do I save those values, like for subsequent post? I wanted to make sure it was over SSL because this is kind of internal information, so I need to make sure it was that. I needed to log in. I couldn't just be a public site. You have to log into it. I wasn't exactly sure where you're supposed to put code. Like I understand, and I'm not completely dumb when it comes to MVC. I completely understand all the pieces of the framework. I get it. I understand the concepts. I've never really done it. So this is me trying to do it. So like where to structure the code. I know you have models and views and controllers, and I understand all those. But even inside of them, I was a little unaware of a couple things. And then if I want to do something like a modal window. So to show you what the application looks like, so you can see it, It's a very exciting application that looks like, so it has a login, and I tried to log in locally, but it just doesn't want to connect. So I've already connected to what it would look like in the real world, and so I pull data back and I display it. And I do some calculations on it. This is just internal information to our company, like what type of licenses people use and stuff like that. But I had a lot of questions when it came to this particular thing. So I wanted to kind of talk about that just to show you myself. So I built this, I sent it to a friend of mine that does MVC, and he went, damn, you did this and this and this wrong. Biggest thing I think I did wrong was I do have controllers. I had a home controller, but in the home controller, I had a ton of other things. So I just have, an index, and then I have this post when they do a search, and then I have all these like data helpers where I go get the Azure table storage data, and I had all those inside of the controller. And he's like, "That's wrong. You got to take those out of there. That like totally goes against the mindset of MVC." So that was the first thing I did is I made a classes, and inside of there I have the helpers class which goes and gets my data and stuff like that. So that was the first step that I did. I needed a form where they submit things and send them back to me. And how I figured out how to do that was the search, you pass it, data form. Again, I'm in no way saying that any of this, that's why I said look at my bad code. So that's what I did there. And then I have different commands whether or not you're doing what type of search, because you can like customize what type of data that you want. So I'm passing that. So I like honest opinion, is this a train wreck? Like, is it not great? It's okay, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. It's okay, I'm a web form developer, it's all right. So I had to figure out a way to do that, and I did that with passing this data form back into the actual application. I looked at the user, and I kind of determined their role. I wasn't using the role in the way that they use it. I just basically set the identity of the user with the login, and then I interpret that to do things. And so I'd use this viewbag.customVisibility to set a particular attribute of a CSS class, and then in my view, I then look at that kind of stuff and display it and like interpret it. So I have things like, let's see, that's something else. There's one. Well, I'm looking for one now. Like here. So I'm setting that in the view bag, and then on the view, I pull it back out of there. Total train wreck. Raise of hands if it's a train wreck. It's okay. I think it's a train wreck, but it works. So that was actually another thing I had a big problem with too, because again, I'm obviously used to web forms with session and just having state and bringing state back, view state and that kind of stuff, and setting my controls. But whenever you work with MVC, I found, in my opinion, it's like you have your layout, and then if you do something, you have to like rebuild the layout with all your new stuff in it. And this is like a real struggle for me as a web form developer trying to do MVC, is understanding how you set those things properly. And so again, this is just me showing you what I've kind of struggled with and done. Another thing that I found was a bit of a challenge was, where was that at? Okay, I can't remember it's in there. That's okay. If I wanted to force SSL. So in there, it wasn't in my root config. I believe it's in my bundle. No. Oh, that's in the startup, I think. I think that's where I put it. Now I can't remember. I just searched for it too, so I knew exactly where it was, and now I can't remember where it is. Basically, I made a new class, this action filter, and the require SSL, and then after it's executed, then I determine whether or not it's in 443, and if so, then I force it into 443, and then I decorate the controller actions with that, or the root with that, so the require SSL. So again, this is me trying to find how to do something I would probably do very quickly in web forms, but I'm kind of learning as I go with that. So I don't know how interesting that is, but it was interesting to me as I went along with it. So, has anybody else tried to do something like this? Any web form developer tried to do anything like this? No? So are you guys full-time MVC developers, you two? Both of you guys are full-time MVC?
Was, and then I switched over to AIS.
Okay. Do you have any tips for web form developers that would want to move into MVC? Have you ever done web forms?
No,
Okay, so you've done web forms and you've done MVC. Is this the wrong way to go about it, or?
It seems like you're avoiding some of the templates and setups that NBC has out for. I haven't used the latest version of NBC. I've used, I guess, the one akin to .NET 4.0.
Okay.
But it has a logging controller for you.
Login. Yeah, actually, so when
it takes a little bit of use to getting used to it.
when I made the login control, so I started with the template, and I think I deleted all that, and I kind of built it back up from scratch. So the login control, I kind of made myself with this account controller in which I set. But I know in the templates it has a login. But
And as well, I believe you specified the reviews, you specified the reviews for the SSL. I forget offhand how to do it. So usually
What-
websites are either all one or all the other. It's usually not a mixed, websites are usually a mixed state other than a login page.
okay. So do you have any tips for someone trying to learn MVC?
Yeah,
You say
there's a lot, I mean, you need to use
Just-
JavaScript to make your page.
do the job, use much more JavaScript.
Because the
Okay.
law was just passing the data and then letting jQuery JavaScript do.
Is that what you're using with your binding and just your action of the page and your validation?
You can do basic binding, but as far as hide this, do that, I mean, the less you put into JavaScript.
I do have some JavaScript in there, but not a ton. So, okay, so you're just saying in the controller, send something back that does they call it JavaScript
Yeah,
in the controller to then show stuff?
Like I saw, you have your display nodes and all there. I mean,
Right.
you would specify the class and maybe pass a overall div tag worth of data, which JavaScript could read to do that type of formatting.
Okay. So much more JavaScript, much less. So you can see though, I'm a web form, so I'm used to putting that kind of stuff in the back end. But
And then
that's the
also,
shift.
MVC works really well with the interfacing with API type of style data.
okay.
That's what JavaScript comes in handy. You can post it that form. So instead of posting directly to the form, go in there, you can send JavaScript post to an API connection.
Okay.
That's a little bit cleaner, easier way.
A little bit cleaner. Okay.
Oh, you can post it in MVC. There's no issue with posting.
This was another big thing too, is how do you handle if you need to retain data? So this data set that does this is a big data set. I would just hit query it again, and I actually haven't hit this in a little while, so it's going to be a little bit longer. But it's a lot of data that it has to get and then interact with. So what I do is I want to keep that in memory so I don't have to go hit it again. So in order to accomplish that, I worked with, let's see, actually it's in my data helper class. It's up here. I write that to, let's collapse that a little bit. Collapse this guy so you guys can see a little bit better. It's down here. So I'm using this cache and I set it in there for 1 hour. Is that normal practice or is that crazy to do something like that? It is a very large amount. Well, the thing is, it's always changing because we decide to write different data into there. So the whole Azure table is 40 or 50 columns. I mean, it's a huge, it's a lot of data.
Just have subviews. So you have individual models that bind to your individual components. So you don't have to have everything. Just because it's one page doesn't mean it has to be one view.
So the reason I did that is because I just pull all the data together, and then when you query, I just hit it again and again. I just re-query that data over and over in memory so that it's much faster than having to go back to Azure. And in no way am I looking for help how to fix my app. I want this discussion so that other people can learn, because I don't know if people think like I do as a web form developer going in MVC. That's why I thought this would be an interesting topic. So,
that's a very interesting thing, that the old data set model.
Okay. So I should be querying just parts of the data at one time, and then not worrying about keeping it in session.
What does everyone else think?
My thought there is that's just going to require multiple hits to this API.
The web form, you're absolutely right. You take one data set, put it in memory, and you just go against that and massage it around. That's definitely not to use a lot in web forms, but
It's just an MVC, and this is where I struggle with it. It's like, well, what are you supposed to do? What if you can only hit this API because it's a huge hit against it, and the data you're pulling is this dynamic, enormous amount of data, and even if it's very costly for you to hit this API for some reason. Maybe it's not even a lot of data. It's just you only get 5 transactions a day, or I don't know, something. But to hit it on every request seems like, that just seems illogical to me, because it's like, that's not efficient.
So some things you can cache, that's the thing. So let's say.
Okay, so using the caching is common practice in MVC? Like I have, well,
Yeah,
I think that's what I.
page, like maybe that first drop down, maybe that's always the same value each day.
Right.
That you can cache.
Actually, I have that hard coded. But that's even better, so it's permanently cached.
So certain things like that, and maybe you know that you can cache the result of each one of those.
Okay. So using cache is not taboo in MVC. It's a different mindset, and you shouldn't be doing it in the way that most web form developers probably think you should use it.
Usually you cache the control result.
Okay. Good. Fair enough. Thank you. That's good information.
There's actually like their attributes around, if I remember correctly, there's attributes around control.
Really? Okay. So I don't know if that was helpful to anybody else. Again, how many are you guys? You were web forms. You were not. Is anybody else? Are you web form developers?
We're primarily web forms right now. Transition.
Okay. You're transitioning MVC. Is this anything similar to what you've been doing? No. Like, hell no, I wouldn't do that. That's crazy. How are you guys approaching that?
What we're working with is just very different.
Yeah, different kind of data. Okay. All right.
We haven't worked with that.
But I will tell you, we had a situation where we were trying to put a lot of data on the page, and so when we first started, we did something very similar.
Something similar? Okay.
So it wasn't, you're not off base,
Okay.
Until we learned better.
Until you learn better. And so,
Until we saw other patterns, I should say, not learn better, until we saw other patterns.
other patterns. Just different ways to load and pull and show the data. A different
Once we
mindset.
realized that we could split things off into components and use JavaScript to help like glue the pieces together. That was really sort of the big insight.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Because also I was trying to do everything in that model page, it sort of takes you back down to the old classic ASP, really.
Well, I like classic ASP. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I have had to do ASP. Like, it was like 2 years ago. Some old client came to us and they're like, we have ASP. I'm like, oh God, okay. So started going back to includes and all that kind of fun stuff. Okay, so that's my bad code, which is why I look like that. So now I told you, I don't even know how long this talk is going to last. It depends on how long we want to talk. Actually, I'm not doing too bad. I'm like at 40 minutes. So kind of my tips for the future, my thoughts, and just in a lot of reading that I've done on it. I really think web forms will be around for a little while. But I think they will go away. But I don't think they're going to go away tomorrow. I think there's going to be a lot of web form work to be done for the next 3 to 5 years. 5 maybe is stretching it. 1 to 3 years maybe is probably a little bit better. Because I think there's a lot of companies that just can't change their stuff over to MVC. I think they're going to have to like bolt on other pieces and wrap them or extract out some of their functionality, but like to change their entire product over to a completely different development model is not something that, we have 1 million+ lines of code. That's not, oh, let's send it through a compiler, let's send it through a converter and knock it out. It's not going to happen. I do think that you should be looking at rewriting your web forms, but obviously doing that in stages and very selectively as to how you implement that. I think if I was starting a new project, I'd probably start it as MVC, not web forms, so I wouldn't have to deal with it in the future. And I think that web forms will ultimately evolve into some sort of land of open source life, and I think it's going to carry on for a little while at least in an open source fashion. I think Microsoft will support it officially for longer than probably at least another year or two, and then I think it's going to roll into some open source. Maybe that happens sooner, but then I think it will be in an open source capacity, and I think the community is going to support it for a while because I think there's a lot of work that people are going to need new updates to these controls and stuff to be done. So, do you guys agree, disagree? Think about the same? Do we have any other thoughts on what they think it might be?
Is there any estimation of like how many web form versus MVC projects
Holy cow, I've tried, like I searched like every way I could think of to Google that question, and there's like no way to know. I mean, there's just,
I mean, unfortunately, Stack Overflow tends to go with most of the latest.
right, I
So
mean,
you always bias towards the latest version.
exactly, and
There is so much going on. There's so many.
I mean, there's just so many. I mean, there's so many. And so, you know, I'm speaking honestly, but we have competitors that they're already written in MVC, but most of them are web forms just like we are. But some of them are already in MVC, so now that's like one less technical burden that they have to deal with. But we do. And we'll find some answer to it. Again, I think it's going to be some hybrid solution of some kind of wrapping or some, you know, encapsulation of web form functionality that we'll expose via an MVC framework. But to what we've actually thought about, so what we have is we have a system where people take our platform and they produce a website with it. And that's like a public-facing site, but it has this admin area where you administrate and change all your content. We've talked about keeping that web forms because we built it and we'll just maintain it. But everything that they produce will be through an MVC-driven development model. So that like it's some kind of somewhere in between there. So, but that's a good. You're right. I mean, there's a lot of code out there, and I've tried to find. I was like, how many web form applications are there? Did you mean MVC? Because there's this. All right. So there is a chance for another beer. This question's a little bit easier. It is a date question. But who can tell me when Monty Python the Holy Grail was released? What year? First answer wins.
74.
Close? Very close.
Do I just keep throwing them out?
You could, if you want a beer.
73.
Wrong way.
75.
There's the winner. 75. It's actually, I think, January 1st, 1975. So I owe you a beer.
Okay, I'm gonna donate.
Oh, well, then you can maybe make a friend. All right, so I just wanted to give away another beer because I just feel like it. So this is a little bit about me. Again, I have about 16 years development doing web development. Started doing ASP, MCPD, and all that. I've worked a lot with Azure. I've done a ton with Azure, delivered 5 Azure boot camps. I am a grandfather. Most people wouldn't believe that. But I am a grandfather. I have a 1-year-old grandson. And then this is just my contact information. Again, I'm the technical evangelist for my company, but I love talking about Azure and different things. So given my choice, I would have much rather shown you Azure Search. And if you want to, I can show you Azure Search and like how you can integrate it into your site if I have time left to do so. But that's really what I really like talking about the most. But again, this is topic number 4 in a very long list of submissions. So I had to kind of come up with what the topic was supposed to be. But I did at least I figured one of the best ways to learn something is obviously through experiencing it. That's when you get probably like the most ingrained information. And I at least could tell you my experiences of what I learned along this journey that I'm taking. But I would love to talk about Azure too. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to talk in any way. And if you want to know anything about Kentico, I'll be glad to tell you about that too. So it's a good .NET-based content management system, and it's real easy to develop with. So with that, I'll leave you with this picture. And that's it. So.